Stinking ready. Oh, yeah. Welcome back to Truth Hurts. We expose corrupt politicians and the lying corporate media. We're going to do both of those today here, broadcasting live from Roseville, Minnesota, in the belly of the beast, the liberal zombie apocalypse of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Join me as always, MAGA Jesse. What are we going to talk about today?
Yep, we got a good show lined up. Looks like our thing on the bottom there is from the old episode, but that's okay. We got Steve Simon violating the Constitution, Brad Tabke not being seated, Democrat dropping out of the Senate special election, and then we will be talking about some rumors that Kendall Qualls will be running for governor, as if that's what we need in this state right now, is another rhino who wants to step up to the plate. So we'll get into all of that good stuff. I see we got Tucker91, Susie Scarella, and Razzle Dazzles in the comments already, so appreciate you guys tuning in.
Back in the studio, running the dials, Deep State himself, Mr. Deep State himself, Dawson. No microphone, I'm assuming, nor do you need to talk, but thank you for running the dials. If you want to interrupt us anytime, hit that Rumble Rant button. We will go live to your comment. We'll try to read as many other comments as possible on Rumble at least. We'll try to get to other platforms too. Thank you to the audience. Join us on Facebook Live and Twitter. This is going to be a fun show, and I guarantee you're going to learn something today. Not that we have all the answers, but I think we're on to something pretty major. So the show is called A Major Constitutional Crisis, and there really is going to be a major constitutional crisis in Minnesota, and we have to remember the blame is on the Democrats here, okay? The Republicans are just governing the way that the election went, right? They won 67 seats in the Minnesota House. No one's actually questioning that they won 67 seats. The only question is, how many seats do the Democrats have? You have one that was found not in his district. A vacancy has occurred, will occur on February 14th because he cheated. He ran for an office he wasn't eligible to run for, and a court found him not to be eligible. Okay, so the Democrats created that. Plus, I assume it's a Democrat that threw away 20-some ballots in Shakopee. I don't know. I can't prove that. But some elected official or election official threw away 21 ballots in Shakopee for a seat that was actually determined by a margin of 14. That is not a fair election. People's voice are going to be disenfranchised if you allow election to stand when the margin of supposed victory is less than the amount of spoiled ballots, or ballots that were not even ever brought into the system. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be a new election in 54A. Okay. Democrats put themselves in this position. We're going to get into all this kind of stuff. Before we do, we got to talk about Jordan B. Peterson coming to the Excel Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. If you'd like to get front row seats to that great show, you can go to truthhurtsnews.com/JBP as in Jordan B. Peterson. Go to truthhurtsnews.com/JBP. There's still a chance for you to win those front row seats. We scooped up the last two. They're a great, great deal. I'd love to take those seats, but I want to give them to you, a fan of the show. So make sure you go to truthhurtsnews.com/JBP. We're brought to you by Warden Wessel of Keller Williams Realty. If you're looking to buy a home or you're looking to sell a home, give my good friend Warren a call at 612-419-7453. And if you're buying a home, give the guys at John Galt Mortgage a chance at financing that home. They like to joke to people on social media that they're not a fake company. They are a real company. It's called John Galt. If you've read Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, you'd understand the character. But they're a real company, and why not try to finance your home through them? It's just give them a shot. JohnGaltMortgage.com. Also brought to you by Alpine Camry in St. Cloud, Minnesota. This show is also funded by those people that are supporters. You could be a premium supporter of this show by going to truthhurtsnews.com and clicking on Support Us, $8 a month or $88 a year to be a premium subscriber, and by doing Rumble Rants. So thank you, everyone. Mickey Murray, good to see you. Razzle Dazzle. T-Wall, the beautiful, wonderful T-Wall for life is in there. By the way, T-Wall, hold up the cookies real quick.
Yep, we still got the cookies.
Yeah, Bridget literally forgot the cookies and the gift card. So I don't know what that says about her, but she didn't take it with her. Okay, let's go to...
And yeah, we also got Amaze Me, who is saying that finally you get to tune in live. We appreciate you tuning in live as well. And Razzle Dazzle says, we talked about this on Tuesday. We did talk about this issue a little bit on Tuesday, but we do have some updates to give you based on what Steve Simon is saying, based on what the Democrats are saying, based on what the Republicans are saying. And especially as it gets closer and closer, we're going to be able to piece together exactly how the opening day of legislature will look. because I don't think anybody has the complete answers on what that is going to look like yet. But we do have some updates and different rules and things that we've been examining. So, we got some new information to throw at you guys today.
Oh, yeah. Razzle Dazzle, you will see exactly what we know right now and how different this is. And by the way, we're going to be talking about this a lot in the whole month of January because it's crazy. At this point right now, we have no idea what's going to happen on Tuesday, January 14th. Do you know how boring the first day legislative session really is? You know, the last time I remember a fun opening day of the legislative session was in January. Actually, I remember the date, January 5th of 2021. And that's when Eric Mortensen swore in for the first time to be a House member. And on the opening day, the first time he took office, he was making motions to move the Never Again bill. And in that case, wait. Was it the Never Again bill? No. Sorry. He was making a motion to bring up the resolution in Governor Walz' emergency powers. And he actually had everything mapped out where he even called into question the ruling of the speaker, which is Melissa Hortman at the time. And it was great. And that was fireworks. And that was fun. And then they gavelled him out because Democrats really don't care about, what's right or wrong. They just care about power. And you're going to see that today. So let's go to truthhurtsnews.com. Dawson, pull this up for me. You guys can follow at home, too. This is Steve Simon, the Secretary of State. Most Republicans in the state know who this guy is and know a lot of problems about this guy. He is entering this equation about what's going on in the Minnesota House because there's one little minor thing in state law that gives him a role on the opening day of the Minnesota House, and we'll get into that. So just a quick background, if you're watching this for the first time, you know what's going on in Minnesota. The Republicans and Democrats both won 67 seats on Election Day, November, 5th? November 6th? I can't remember. They won 67 seats each, and the Minnesota House got 134 seats open for elections. Dawson, just take away from the article for now here. I'll get into the nuts and bolts in a second. So it was a tied house, and it's the first time there's been a tied house since 1979. Now, since that time, we have found out that there is one ineligible person to take office. A court found that, and that was a cheater by the name of Chris Johnson. Okay, I'm not going to get back into this special election and how Tim Walz is wrong and the Republicans are suing it. It's moot at this point because that's a totally different situation, and that's going to be dealt with in the courts.
That's the battle ahead.
That's going to be dealt in courts. What we're going to focus on is what the hell is going to happen in the legislature. But it's so important to understand that there is a 67 to 66 majority by Republicans because the Democrats cheated, right? They had a member that wasn't eligible and ran despite the residency requirement. Okay, this is where it gets interesting now. In order to win things in the Minnesota House, and really, quite frankly, most Democrat institutions, you need a majority of the body. Actually, really, when you think about it, it's always that way. In a Democratic institution, a majority always wins because you can change rules. There's a lot, even if there's like a 2/3 requirement, essentially things come back at some point to a majority, right? Actually, one thing that makes us interesting in the United States is we have a constitutional republic. We're not a straight up majority. And that means that even a Democrat institution can't violate the Constitution, although we're going to talk about how they're going to do that. But in this case, a Democrat institution, the body, the will of the body, which means a majority, determines the direction of that organization. Right now in the Minnesota House, anyone could see there's only 133 members elect because on January 14th, there will be one vacancy, and that's in 40B. And once again, that's the Democrats' fault. They cheated, and they got caught. Now, I know there's 134 House seats, but there is not a member in 40B. And so that's 133, and a majority of 133 is 67.
And the Minnesota House has had plenty of occasions where a vote is passed by a vote of 67 to whatever the number of people in opposition are. Mm-hmm. So 67 absolutely is a quorum, 67 absolutely is a majority, and 67 absolutely can get a bill across the finishing line. The Democrats are now trying to argue, of course, that 68 is a majority. That is not defined in law. That is not defined in the Constitution. That's not defined in the state house rules. And in Masons, it's actually defined as a majority of the elected members, which would be if there's 133 elected members, as you say, that means 67 is a majority, and the Republicans should be able to run the show on this opening day. But of course, Steve Simon is going to try to block that.
Well, let's get to that, because where does he enter this equation? At this point, the Democrats, we brought this up on Tuesday, led by Speaker Designate Melissa Hortman, and as they call him, floor leader Jamie Long. Now, can you call them a floor leader if they're not even going to be on the floor?
I don't think so.
He should change his Twitter bio.
Mm-hmm.
Democrat House members, is from the article, Democrat House members-elect have now stated publicly that they will not show up to the Minnesota Capitol on the first day of the legislative session in an attempt to prohibit the Minnesota House from having a quorum. Once again, as Jesse said, a quorum is a majority. There's 133 members. They're arguing there's 134. There's not. But that's what they're arguing, and so they believe a quorum is 68. They don't believe that, by the way.
And also
they're
during,
making that up.
I think we'll show an example of the opening day of session. But what Steve Simon is going to say along, is he reads the number of election certificates on file. So if the Democrats show up, if the Democrats show up and actually do their jobs on that opening day, and Republicans are there as well, what is Steve Simon going to say? He says he will say there are 133. Election certificates on file. Really, what he should say is there's 132, because we shouldn't be counting the 54A race because of Brad Tabke's that whole situation that we've talked about. So that's a whole situation that we need to talk about too. The Secretary of State gets to appoint a member of the legislature to serve as the clerk pro tempore, and that person needs to hopefully be changed out by the Republicans if they are not going to. If they end up listing 54A on the legislative roll call. So we need a clerk pro tempore who is not going to recognize the election certificate or swearing in ceremony of Brad Tabke. And the same thing needs to happen with the chair. So, we're in uncharted territory to say that a clerk pro tempore on the opening day of session or the Secretary of State serving as the chair on the opening day of session should be removed. I don't know if there are any examples in Minnesota history where that has happened, but this is only the second time in Minnesota history where it's been initially 67-67. So we're in times that it's unpredictable, and Steve Simon is going to play a major role in trying to use delay tactics for the Democrats.
I like how when we keep talking about this, you keep in your head going back to, well, if the Democrats show up, they're not going to show up. They literally are not going to show up. And the only reason that they're going to show up is they say that that the Republicans go back to the negotiation table, meaning you cave, which the Republicans absolutely should not cave. And I'm going to spell out exactly what the Republicans should do here in a second. Minnesota law, let's go back to the article Dawson. Minnesota law, which is statute 305, actually states that members, quote, shall meet on the first day of legislative session. I put in Cornell Law. Cornell Law is a great online resource. Shall is an imperative command, usually indicating that certain actions are mandatory, not permissive. Democrats are breaking law by not showing up. All right? Shall is a strong term. Everyone that has a carry permit in Minnesota understands that. Like the sheriff shall issue your permit. It doesn't say may, it says shall. So we all know this is shall is strong. They have to do it, right? So in Minnesota statute,
it would be weak if it said may.
Right. You see in Minnesota statute 305, because this is the only place we could find where the Secretary of State is not in the Minnesota Constitution in terms of convening the legislature. So it says, at noon of the day appointed for convening the legislature, the members shall meet in their respective chambers. Okay, so the way we see it, if Democrats do not show up, then only 67 members elect will be taking the oath of office and swearing in, thus making the Minnesota a 67-member organization. Where am I wrong on that?
No, I think you've got it right on. And, there was a document that I found. It was created by the research department of the Minnesota House of Representatives, and they were talking about this because, it isn't defined necessarily in the Constitution that Steve Simon needs to be overseeing this process. And basically what this says is the responsibility for convening a new legislature in regular session is given by state law to two elected constitutional officers of the executive branch on the day in January prescribed by law For the beginning of the regular session, the Lieutenant Governor calls the Senate to order, and the Secretary of State calls the House to order. In the absence of the designated executive branch officer, the law gives the responsibility to the oldest member of the House. So what that tells us is if Steve Simon goes along with what these Democrats are doing, and Steve Simon chooses not to show up to the opening day of session, Republicans have an alternative because they can nominate the oldest member of the House to serve in that executive role, to serve as the chair during that immediate
Well, I don't even think we need
time.
to do. Yeah, true. I don't think we need to get there. And I'm getting to that. Will you move that cord out of the way, by the way? Just throw that on the ground. I don't know why that's on there. So, okay. So once again, and I was going to get to that. I should have rehearsed the cadence on this article. He was working on the second and third one more. So once again, not only does it say, not only does that mean that only 67 Republicans will be members, it also is very clear to understand that the Democrats here are breaking the law. Go back to what it says there in 3-0 or 3.05. If the members shall meet in the respective chambers, either one of two things is happening. The Democrats are not members, or the Democrats are breaking the law. Is it the rules for thee, not for me kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
I think they're not members because they didn't take an oath of. What's the point of an oath of office if you're a member without taking the oath of office? If you're not swearing it, isn't that always how it goes? You have to swear in to be considered a member. Now, by the way, Democrats are going to get a paycheck. Allegedly, they're going to paycheck. There's a lawsuit right there. Me as a taxpayer should be able to sue them for taking a paycheck if they haven't sworn in. They're not a member. They're not a legislator. They're not a voting member if they have not sworn in. And if 67 people with an election certificate show up and swear in, that is the membership. 67. Then, Jesse, you only need 34 people to pass laws. And boy, I think the Never Again bill should be first on the agenda.
I agree. Yep, it would be very fun to see how Walter Hudson would vote on something like that, because considering the fact that he used to be a sponsor of that bill, we'll see where he ends up falling on it this time. But considering that he used to be a sponsor of the bill, I would expect him to be a vote for the bill. But now that he decides to trash Action for Liberty, and he sounds just like every establishment hack that's out there now. I mean, you can't tell the difference between Paul Gazelka and Walter Hudson anymore. If you look at their Twitters, they're saying the exact same thing. They're the exact same people because they're obviously opposed to the grassroots, and Walter Hudson is obviously just upset about losing his $40,000 a year job with the MNGOP. So, but I can't wait to see how he votes on the Never Again bill, and I agree that Republicans need to take full opportunity and full advantage of this majority.
We should play this game, Dawson, and what we can say and how Jesse will tie it back to Walter Hudson in some way. I don't even know how Walter even came up on this conversation. Oh, the Never Again bill. There you go. Okay. Yeah, that's right, because he was the author. All right, so Dawson, let's go to the A2. I want to show you guys what the start of the legislative session looks like. This will be interesting because this is where Steve Simon comes into play, and I'll read you a little bit more of that statute. But as it states, or as it's done in the Minnesota House, it convenes. So let's go ahead. And we're going to skip around a little bit, but this is the start of the Minnesota House so this would be January 3rd of 2023. So the last legislative session. Go ahead and play it, Dawson. Okay. You got a lot of politicking going on here. And they're going to announce, you can skip by 5 seconds forward. You're going to see there's former legislator Dave Lizagard, no longer in office.
The Secretary of State of the great state of Eyes.
Okay, so this is, and notice the mask in 2023, isn't that funny? So this is the Secretary of State. He's going to come in, and his job is to convene, or to call to order, by the way. I should be specific, call to order. Now you see more than just members in here. You're seeing family members too. This is a big deal for them. Shaking all the Republicans' hands there. Okay, he's gonna go to the rostrum. Okay, that's the Secretary of State, Steve Simon. Get the media there. It's a big show. There's Harry Niska and his wife Jen. You see, and it's pretty common to have kids and spouses. He's gonna take the rostrum. He's gonna have some comments. He's gonna gavel in. Now, I would argue, Jesse, once he bangs that, it's been called to order.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and stop real quick. Jesse, I would argue his job is done at that point. Because that's all it says in statute 305. We'll go back to it. All right. Now skip ahead a little bit, Dawson. What his first act is actually to appoint the clerk pro tem. And in this case, that was Ruth Richardson. She's a former legislator from Eagan, Burnsville area. Is it Burnsville? That's not right. Eagan and Invergrove, not Invergrove.
Well, she
Mendota Heights.
represented some of St. Paul before,
Yeah, I think
too.
it's
So
Eagan,
I
Mendota
can't
Heights.
remember where exactly her district is, but yeah, she became a Planned Parenthood executive.
Yeah, keep going on, Dawson. I just want you to skip ahead because what they're going to do now is they're going to. So there's the clerk pro temp taking the clerk's position. Now, she's not going to be the clerk throughout the legislative session. That's actually a staff position.
Ever-abiding God.
Okay,
help
they're
us
going to
to
pray,
be
keep
present
fast
to this
forward. They're going
moment.
to do the pledge after this.
It is
Luckily,
all we have.
go ahead, fast
Yeah, I
forward.
watched
there,
the
Dawson.
2019 version of this, and Paul Marquardt was
penny
the
voices to your
clerk for that one.
and the
So it's always, whoever Simon decides to select.
Right.
And Simon should select a Republican, considering it's a Republican majority House.
Okay, so they did the pledge. Luckily, Kamala wasn't leading it.
Yeah.
Then they're going to sit down, and now what they're going to do is they're going to do a roll, and this is where they go district by
The
district.
clerk pro tem will call the roll by legislative district.
By the way, have you guys seen this before? This is boring
District
stuff, very
1A,
nerdy.
John Burkle.
Yeah, and
This is so boring,
and
but
this-
not this year.
Burkle present.
Go ahead, sorry.
right. The clerk pro temp in
1B,
this year, in
Deborah
2025, what they need to do,
Keel.
what Ruth Richardson is doing, when they
Keel
read through the
present.
roster, when they go through the
2A,
call of the
Matthew
legislators
J.
and they go through them
Grossel.
by legislative district, what needs to
Grossel
happen is
present.
54A needs to be
2B,
excluded from
Matt
this
Bliss.
list. Because
Okay,
if you
Dawson,
recognize
hold on
this,
one second. Will you thank you, pause it. I couldn't hear you. Go.
right.
Keep going.
So if you recognize Brad Tabke, it's going to allow him to be sworn in, which I guess I'll talk about in a little bit here. But that doesn't actually prevent the GOP from revoking his election certificate after the fact by a majority vote.
Right.
So that wouldn't completely ruin the situation. But we need a clerk pro tempore who is actually going to exclude 54A because, like we're talking about, it can't be approved of with the surrounding facts.
That's a great point. Yeah, and we will get that in the second section. Okay, so go ahead and fast forward here, Dawson, and just grab that marker on the bottom because they're gonna go through all 134 districts. So this is gonna take a while. Okay, then
they
so go
swear
back.
in
You see,
there.
then they have a row person. So then
They bring in a
now go
Supreme
back
Court
a little bit.
justice.
After the roll is taken, a Supreme Court justice, this is Associate Justice McCaig, I don't know, McCaig, I think, comes up and then swears them in. Okay, now why is there a swearing in where you take an oath of office, to uphold the Constitution? Why is there a swearing in if you could be a member without doing it, right? So it's just a valid question. Is clearly your employment is based off you taking that oath of office. It's just so clear, right? Mm-hmm. And so until they take that oath of office, they should not get a paycheck. That seems just very rational, right?
And how could you really, honestly, take an oath to the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, and the state Constitution to abide by Minnesota statutes if you're going to break the law and not have an election certified that should not be certified if they're breaking the law in the process of being sworn in?
Right.
It shows that everything is a giant hypocrisy for these Democrats.
For these Democrats and Republicans, a lot of the time, by the
Right.
way, because we got to call both parties. But in this case, the Republicans look like they're navigating correctly. And I'll get into exactly how they should navigate.
Because
this thing.
Action for Liberty is leading the way and showing them how to do so.
Right on. All right. So then what will happen after they all swear, and they swear in mass here. Mm-hmm. I've seen it. There's not necessarily one way of doing it. Okay. What is that, Dawson? I think you might have gone too far because after this, what they do is they're doing a quorum call. Go ahead. After the swearing in right there. And he's going to give his speeches, talk about how important
you deserve it.
Okay, this is the quorum call, okay? Now, where the Democrats are standing right now is they're not going to show up, which once again means they're not going to be members because they haven't sworn in my opinion. They're members elect, but they're not a member of the Minnesota House. I think this is where the Republicans really got them.
Mm-hmm.
Until you swear in, you're not a member. Okay? You're a member elect, and you should not get paid as a member.
Right.
Seems so obvious here. Okay. So then the Democrats are contending because the House is comprised of 134 districts that there's 134 members. Wrong. There's 133 because you guys tried cheating and got caught. So until there's actually someone that wins from the 100 or House District 40B, there's 133 members, and a majority is 67. By the way, that would be the reading of the Constitution. That'd be the reading of the House rules, and it's also the reading of Mason's Rules of Order. So if anything else needs clarification, Mason's, what is the section? Do we know the section? We were just reading this.
151, I think it was.
Yeah, or no, 505.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, Section 505 of Mason's Rules. The Minnesota House uses Mason's rules. Okay, so
No, it was 501.
I was just reading it, 505.
Well,
isn't it?
okay, well, Rule 501 at the bottom of it, it says the minority rule is when there is a vacancy, a quorum will consist of the majority of the members remaining qualified, which means 67.
Well, okay, yeah, I was quoting 505. It says, when no quorum is present, a call of the House can be ordered and the attendance of absent members compelled. The body can cancel all leave of absences and require the attendance of all members. So you're right. So 501.
Okay.
Good point, Jesse. So, yeah, so not only House rules, not only Constitution, but 501. Where are the Democrats going to get money for their booze now, Jake, without their paychecks? I suggest we go track down Wolgamut at all the liquor stores, see if he's chugging a bottle of vodka if he doesn't show up. All right, so let's go back to the article. A press release from Secretary Steve. Oh, no. Yeah, that's all we needed to show there, right?
Yeah.
Because then it's just like usually they're gaveling out. It's not
Right.
nothing really.
The only thing that's,
I'm sorry.
what Steve Simon does following the call is he says we will now move on to the election of speaker, and then both, the Republicans nominate someone, the Democrats nominate someone, then they give their speeches and hold the vote.
Okay, stupid me. I totally forgot that. Great point. Go back to that video, Dawson. Great point. That's like kind of an important one. All right, fast forward a little bit. Literally once they establish the quorum, there's Frank Hornstein. He's endorsing Melissa Hortman to be the speaker. Okay, fast forward, then you're gonna have a Republican nominating. Let's see, who was it this time? You're gonna have a Republican nominating. Here you go. Nope, Zach Stevenson seconding the nomination. Keep going. Look at all these masks. Mrs. Hortman with so much gratitude being selected. All right, there's is that Torkelson? That's
It looks like it.
Yeah, Torkelson nominating Lisa Demuth, which is on the left. Keep going. And then there's probably a seconding
Bernie
by
Perryman.
what's that? Yeah. And then they do a vote, and that's the speaker. Then after the speaker, I believe they go to the clerk, so they vote in a clerk so that's a staff position. Although a clerk could technically be a member. I don't think there's anything stopping it. But generally, a clerk doesn't need to be a member. So they have a staff person, and it's really not usually controversial, okay? All right, so there you go. Hortman wins the speakership. Next up, just kind of scroll through the clerk election. Patrick Murphy, I think this was after he retired. So, was that Patrick Murphy? Go back. The white-haired guy, there you go. Yeah, okay, so Patrick Murphy's still in. Oh, you know what? Patrick Murphy is still in. I was thinking of, is it Cal Ludeman that used to be the Senate clerk? That's changed. I've done enough legislative sessions where I'm starting to forget who's still in. Okay, so then, and that's usually not controversial. I think he probably got 134 votes. Then the next business is the sergeant at arms.
Do you think that Republicans will keep him?
These guys usually call balls and strikes. Right? So is there a reason to not believe?
I don't know if he does. I mean, there was plenty of examples where the Democrats were totally weaponizing the rules to target Republicans and finding points of order well taken that should not have been well taken and whatnot.
But Jesse,
so there was only one time actually where, and I've watched a lot of the floor sessions. I remember one time where he was interacting with Melissa Hortman, where Melissa Hortman eventually sided with the Republicans. Okay, we are going to be allowing this vote to take place. So the majority of times it seems as if he's willing to go along to get along.
Yeah, but Jesse, I mean, his job is non-political, and they're going to get political. So I don't know what those conversations are. I mean,
his
it's a fair
job is
point.
to be, a rule follower, then he clearly hasn't done that job well.
But he doesn't make any of the determinations in the end, right? His job is to make suggestions.
Heed advice, right.
Yeah.
Right, and I guess we're not privy to the advice that he's giving.
Correct, yeah. Keep going a little further. I believe the next up is Sergeant at Arms. Just see what the next one is. Keep going. And then, I mean, it really isn't controversial. They're probably actually saying good things about Patrick Murphy. Keep going. And then just look for the change. They're going to vote him in. Then it's the sergeant arms. What's that? What's it say right there? Election of other officers. Yeah. They're in complete determination who their officers are. Maybe it doesn't say specifically sergeant arms. Oh, there you go. Election of chief sergeant arms. Okay, there you go. And that's usually not controversial from what we've seen. All right, that's enough of the video. And it's linked in this article if you guys want to watch it. Actually, it's embedded in the article. So let's go back to the article. A press release from Secretary Steve Simon states that he plans to rule that there is not a quorum present to conduct business and will adjourn the Minnesota House. Tom Hauser, the chief political reporter at KSTP, excuse me. By the way, I'm going to have some beef with Tom Hauser here. Posted that according to the Minnesota Constitution, the Secretary of State presides over the House until a speaker is elected. Now, look, that's what it says. I just highlighted in his article on KSTP's website. That's what it says in his article. That is not correct. That is a false statement. It does not say that anywhere in the Minnesota Constitution. You know what bugs me about this? Now, I asked on Twitter or on X, directed towards Tom Hauser, is this what you were told? Because it's not quoted. Is this what you're told by Secretary of State Steve Simon? Because I'm curious if our government official is lying to us about what the Minnesota Constitution says. Or did some lazy writer in your staff just make this up? This was also retweeted by Tori Van Oot? Is that right? Mm-hmm. From the Star Tribune. You know, remember when the government was trying to crack down on misinformation of, COVID truth tellers, right? Like us. Mm-hmm. Look at how much the media does it. They tell a completely false statement. And the funny thing, actually, this is what actually bugs the crap out of me, is anyone can read the Minnesota Constitution. And we just happen to know it very well because we've been reading this really
and
a
especially
lot
the
lately.
media. Tom Hauser knows better than to just report whatever he's being told by Democrats and politicians. He should be going in and fact-checking and making sure that things are as they say they are within the Constitution. He shouldn't just be taking Simon's word or whatever he is doing here. And Steve Simon, I should note, is not going to be a fair actor within this whole process. I remember at a 2022 rally in Shakopee, he showed up along with all the Democrats in favor of Brad Tabke. So are we supposed to think that a guy that has gone out and campaigned with him is now going to be holding it fairly? Now, Steve Simon alleges that he doesn't make any endorsements during campaigns and during elections because it would be improper as Secretary of State, but he certainly had no problem having his face plastered on a bus with the rest of the Democrats. He certainly had no problem traveling on that bus with the rest of the Democrats, including Walls and Ellison, where he would go to Shakopee and these other swing districts, rally up the troops and tell people to get out and vote. So Steve Simon may claim that he doesn't make endorsements, but I don't know if that what could be more of an endorsement than showing up and rallying people to come out and vote for Brad Tabke than what he did right there. So the fact that he is going to be the one presiding at the very beginning of this, and we're talking about 54A being so critical, we have to keep that in mind that Steve Simon may not be a fair actor when this all comes to fruition.
Marty's 1967 says, you think Tom Hauser would do a better job? Good Lord. Yeah, he's the best one in the Capitol Press Corps, right? Like, if he's the best one, just think about the rest of the press corps. I was watching that press conference the other day, and Esme Murphy, who's probably been there since the 50s, is still asking questions. It's like, oh my God, that's in the press corps. They're so pathetic. By the way, if you don't believe that the Minnesota press corps is pathetic, Capitol Press Corps is pathetic, you got to ask the question, why wasn't it until Tim Walz ran for vice president until we found out most of the lies about that guy, right? Like, where did you guys do? Why didn't you guys do your job? Mm-hmm. Oh, no, you only go after Republicans. That's right. Okay. All right. According to Article 4, Section 15 in the Minnesota Constitution, it's crystal clear that the Minnesota House members choose their presiding officer. Let's go back to the article, Dawson. Section 15, I posted right here in the article. Each house shall elect its presiding officer. And then, of course, other officers as may be prescribed by law. And you were watching them prescribe other laws. But the first thing they do is to determine who their presiding officer is, a.k.a. the Speaker. By the way, the Minnesota Constitution, I don't think people realize this, never actually talks about the Speaker of the House. Do you know that? Mm-hmm. That's not a position described in the Minnesota Constitution. We looked this up many years ago. It just says presiding officer, and we've now called that person the Speaker, which makes sense, speaking for the House. which is really speaking for the majority, you would imagine. Okay, and this is what the Democrats are so butthurt about, is that Republicans are going to actually elect a Speaker of the House that's a Republican. Well, of course they are. Why wouldn't they? And I would argue, Jesse, now they only need 34 votes.
Yeah.
At first, I thought that person needs 67, but if there's only 67 sworn-in members, they only need 34. That's a majority. Right. Okay. Nowhere in the Constitution does it state that Secretary of State Steve Simon, I never thought about that. It's a big tongue
a lot
twister.
of S's, yeah.
Secretary of State Steve Simon, say that 5 times fast, acts at all as the presiding officer. This is the key point, and it seems like a lot of people are missing it. It's not only that this is a lie, according to the Minnesota Constitution, the Secretary of State presides over the House until Speaker's elected. It does not. Speaker's not even in the Minnesota Constitution. It's not in law, okay? That's not in the Minnesota Constitution. But not only is that not the case, right? Also, in this case, it never even says Secretary of State Steve Simon is the presiding officer. In fact, the custom and tradition of the opening of the legislative session where the Secretary of State gavels the House into order comes from State Statute 305, which states the Secretary of State calls the House to order, nothing else. Let's go back to 305. Scroll down a little bit. At noon of the day appointed for convening the legislature, the members shall meet in the respective chambers. We talked about that. Second line, the Lieutenant Governor shall call the Senate to order and the Secretary of State the House of Representatives. And then as Jesse mentioned, in the absence of either officer, the oldest member present shall act in the officer's place, which would be Paul Anderson in the Minnesota House. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Steve Simon probably realizes he needs to at least show up, but technically, Paul Anderson can call the House to order. Guess what Steve Simon is not ever doing? The presiding officer. He's only calling the House to order. You're seeing the Minnesota Constitution. Now, I got a really important constitutional point to be made here. It doesn't matter if a state law says anything else. It's what the Minnesota Constitution says. The Minnesota Constitution is the supreme law of the land. You can't have a state law, which I'm not even aware of that does this, but you can't have a state law that is contrary to what the Minnesota Constitution says, right? I mean, this happens, but those laws are unconstitutional, right? You can't be contrary. You can't go against the Minnesota Constitution. It's supreme. Everything's subordinate to the Minnesota Constitution. And you know how we know this? Because there's an amendment process of the Constitution. So what would be the point of an amendment process, which is a very high echelon, if you could just write a law by simple majority to change the Constitution? Duh! So clearly, the Minnesota Constitution describes what's going on here, and it says in the Minnesota Constitution, very clear, the House shall elect its presiding officer. Who's the House? It's the members that are sworn in. This is very simple stuff. Okay, going back to the article. In a Democrat institution, and this is important, just even when you get beyond what it says in law and what it says in the Constitution, we in the country, even if like all of a sudden the Constitution burned up and we couldn't find it, what it said, and there's no trace of it. I know it seems crazy in today's world with the internet, but let's just say miraculously the Constitution's gone, but we all know Democrat institutions are the will of the body, right? Isn't that an important part? It's the will of the body, and in this case, it's the majority of the body. In a Democrat institution, the body determines the direction the institution goes. No one person, and certainly not a person from another branch of government, the executive branch. This is not just our analysis, it's written in the damn Constitution. Article 3, here we go. Distribution of the powers of government. And this is a very important part of not just the Minnesota Constitution, but the United States Constitution, is that we have separate branches of government. The executive, the judicial, and the legislative. And by the way, the power mostly is in the legislative for good reasons. It's the most representational of the people. We all are supposed to have a representative in government. So in Section 1, Division of Powers, it says the powers of government shall be divided into 3 distinct departments, legislative, executive, and judicial. And it says in the Minnesota Constitution that the Secretary of State is executive, okay? And of course, no one's disputing that, right? So then it goes on, and it's highlighted in the article, no person or persons belonging to or constituting one of these departments shall exercise any of the powers properly belonging to either of the other, except in instances expressly provided in this Constitution, which it's not in. We read the one part of the Constitution where it talks about presiding officers, and it says the House picks the presiding officer. So in other words, the Secretary of State cannot preside over the Minnesota House. It's very important. Just think about that. Democrats, let me talk some reason with you. Let's say in 2026, the Democrats take over the U.S. House. Let's say Hakeem Jeffries is the Speaker of the House. Donald Trump can't walk over to Capitol Hill, take the gavel on first day and go, I'm in charge here. This is what we're doing. You wouldn't argue for that, would you? That would be a very important thing to be against, right? Because that would be a king, right? That would be a king. You don't want a king. You want separated branches of government. Do not make the argument that the executive branch can become the presiding officer over the institution of the Minnesota House. And I think that's what you guys are trying to make. All right. Secretary of State Steve Simon has threatened to violate this separation of powers part of the Minnesota Constitution and create a constitutional crisis in our beloved state, all because, and we have to go back to this, Democrats screwed up and lost the majority due to election cheating. Curtis Johnson, boy, I don't know what this guy's like, but can you imagine? I mean, knowingly. Well, you know what? In fairness to him, he's probably like, a lot of people do this. Why can't I do it? I don't live in the district, but I'll just fool everyone like everyone else does. This happens on both sides of the aisle. We know about you guys. We know there's a lot of people carpetbagging. We know it. All right, Jesse, I got a solution. You ready for it?
Yeah, what's that?
All right, go back to the article, Dawson. This is what Republicans must do to fight back. First of all, I got to argue. This is on the very bottom. Oh, there you go. I got to argue. Can you blow it up a little bit, Dawson? Republicans are in a great position to win on this important battle. The public will be supportive because not only are Democrats obstructing a government proceeding, sound familiar? And trying to stop the legislative functions of our government, but they also plan to receive a salary despite not officially swearing in for the position, not showing up for work, and breaking state law. Get ready, lawsuits. I mean, come on, listen. You go and talk to the man on the street who, unless they watch this show, they're probably not attuned to what's going on at the Capitol. But if you just told them, hey, the Democrats aren't showing up for work, they're actually stopping the legislature from happening, but they're taking your tax money, what do you think people are going to think? You think the Republicans are going to be on the right side on that one? 100%. Yes. No one's going to argue, unless they're like some crazy left-wing radical, that the Democrats should get paid for not showing up. Okay, and by the way, they're not members because they haven't taken the oath of office. All right, all 67 Republicans need to show up at noon on January 14th, answer the roll call from the clerk pro tem, and take their oath of office. At that point, the House will be constituted with 67 members, and they can choose their presiding officer according to the Minnesota Constitution. We read it. They choose the presiding officer. It's not Steve Simon. He's not listed anywhere as the presiding officer. If Secretary of State Steve Simon states the House is adjourned, which is what they're arguing he's going to do, he's just going to adjourn the House, that is out of order, especially since no member has made the motion to adjourn, and therefore they should remain in the chamber. If Simon refuses to call for an election of Speaker, the members should congregate on the floor of House chamber and conduct an election by all present members. The victor will be the presiding officer of the Minnesota House. So just imagine, if he doesn't give up the rostrum, just go in the front of the Minnesota House floor. There's nothing that says you actually have to be up in the high rostrum. You don't have to have the gavel at that point. Just go on the House floor in the chamber that you were required to show up to, and the Democrats are breaking the law by not showing up to. Go to that chamber and hold your election. It could be a voice vote. It could be raising the hand. Hold that election, Republicans. All 67 of you, hold that election. Now, if Simon is crazy enough not to remove himself from the chambers, the next order of business should be to elect a sergeant-at-arms and have him physically remove Simon from the House chamber. He should then be charged with obstruction of a government proceeding, perhaps the same federal charge that was given out to the January 6th people. There you go. Or Republicans, you can cower and be a bunch of pussies and get nothing done. Yeah. Let's actually stand up for the Constitution for once. Let's go to the comments here.
Yeah, we got some comments here. K-Wall for Life says, please tell Steve, tell Steve Simon to update his human suit. The creepy lizard person of him is showing through. And I tend to agree. I mean, this guy has violated the law on so many things when it comes to leading the path to have illegal immigrants be getting driver's licenses so that they can show up and vote, and nothing on the license says that they're not a citizen. He put a person on the ballot for president who wasn't even born in this country, and it took me suing to try to do anything about it. Where is the Republican Party? Nowhere. We got Marty 1967 saying those days are over. Andy Parrish says Dr. Ron Paul for Jake's first ad, hilarious. Billy 22 says this all seems cut and dry, Jake, until you remember the Democrats believe men can menstruate and Republicans lost that debate. And Marty 1967 says it's going to be a battle for Republicans to do the right thing. And it is going to be a massive battle in the House because, like Jake is saying, that Steve Simon is going to argue that a quorum is not met, so Republicans are going to have to appeal the ruling of the chair, request a roll call vote on that. And if Simon is still not willing to allow that vote to even take place, then they're going to have to physically remove him from the chamber, like you're saying, and vote to remove him as the chair if he is not willing to cooperate with with government moving along. So I guess we want to move on to this next topic here?
Can I just finish this?
Yep.
I mean, I also know Article 3 so well because that is why I argued that Walls was breaking the Constitution when he declared emergency powers unilaterally and then decided I'm creating the rules in Minnesota and willing to throw people in jail for him just because there's a cough. So it's like you can't usurp the powers of another branch of government. It's actually very clear. It's stated in the Constitution. Democrats are hell-bent on power, and so are the Republican establishment, just FYI. Okay? It's funny that we're aligned with the Republican establishment on this. At least I hope so. You know, it does seem like Harry Niska, who's the majority leader in the Republican caucus, has got some spine and he's smart, and so he understands that there's a fight here. I mean, they're backed by Mason's rules, the House rules, which actually the House rules are not, voted in, so it'd be temporary House, almost more customs and traditions. And then they're definitely backed by state statute and the Minnesota Constitution. The Democrats have no case here. All they do is they have public opinion, and think how public opinion is going to go when they're not even showing up on the first day. You're literally obstructing a government proceeding. You're stopping the one branch of government from organizing. What? Just the argument that was being made on January 6th is Republicans were trying to stop the placement of the president of the United States. That's what the argument was, and that's not true, by the way. The argument, at least Trump's argument, we got to distinguish this. Some of the people going into the Capitol that day were not following any orders by Donald Trump. They were not in line with Donald Trump. Trump was saying kick the decision back to the states, and that's what the Constitution says to do, or it's a remedy to a stolen election, which he contended, right? And it's his burden to prove in those states, okay? That's what Trump was calling for, right? But regardless, the Democrats say they were trying to throw out democracy by not allowing the Joe Biden to take the presidency. Well, the Democrats are literally doing this. They're not allowing the legislature to take place. And I don't know what Steve Simon's plan is. I mean, he's going to show up because he's actually required by law. I think he's going to show up. I mean, he's got to show up because otherwise Paul Anderson's going to be the person, right?
Yep.
Representative Paul Anderson.
No, I
so
think
he's going to show up, but just think about it. If he adjourns and Gavels don't listen to the guy.
Right.
Just don't listen to him. If he adjourns, you're not doing anything. And he doesn't have the right to adjourn you.
Right. You had made a point before the show that the chair can't make a motion to adjourn. No. That it has to come from the body. So if the body does not make that motion for adjournment, but he tries to push the adjournment anyway, like you're saying, they need to just congregate to the floor and make the decisions by having votes just in person like that, maybe by raise of hands or whatever, or stand on that side if you vote for Lisa, stand on that side if you vote for anyone else. So. I think that Republicans need to take advantage of this, and the fact that they are in this position is. Hold on a second. We got a $10 Rumble rant. JL Jazz says, $10 Rumble rant. Simon usurped the power of the legislature back in 2020 when he arbitrarily changed election laws. He was allowed to get away with it then, so he probably feels he can get away with it again. That's a great point.
And he only gets away with it if we have spineless Republicans. Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, that's a great comment. Sjogren Suss says, stop the game as Simon says. We're not. I mean, literally, you can't make this up. Simon says. That's the rule of law, as Simon says. No, it's not. It's not the rule of law. The Republicans have every right to do what they're doing. And think about it. The big controversial thing Republicans are doing is they're taking their 67 duly elected members, convening a legislative session, and voting who they want to be speaker. They would have been doing that regardless, right? All 67 members would be voting for speaker, right? Correct? Is that not correct? They would do it. That is what you're supposed to do. What's changed is the Democrats know they screwed up. They tried cheating an election, and they're only showing up, or they're only supposed to show up with 66, and therefore Lisa Demuth likely was going to be speaker, or some Republican is going to be the Speaker of the House. And they're saying, no, we don't want to do it. And now they got Steve Simon literally creating a constitutional crisis if he's got the balls to do it. You know, Steve, just try it. Just try it. You know, I hope these Republicans stand firm. They got everything on their side. Okay, I beat this one to death. I love talking about this. This gets me so fired up because, you know, rarely do you see the Republicans with such an ability to take leadership. Finally, you know, you want to talk about Walter Hudson, and then you got Walter Hudson just talking about us all nonstop. You know, isn't it interesting? Walter Hudson's tweeting that they only go after Republicans. That whole hour segment was not about you guys.
Right.
Now, give me a reason to go against Republicans, Walter. Here, let's just focus on the Democrats here, because they're wrong.
It's so funny for him to trash the Action for Liberty booth at the State Fair, considering the fact that he was in line at the State Fair booth this year, desperate to try to get one of our fans. So, you know, he's got all this talk now. He's obviously just another... I see him as a rhino. He's got a better legislative voting record than most, but I mean, he was also the reason that we have AI memes illegal in the state of Minnesota that could influence the election. So he's busy protecting himself from memes, him and his establishment buddies, rather than protecting the people. But Dawson, let's go ahead and pull up the B1 on our document here, because Lisa Demuth has now made the statement that we should not be seating Brad Tabke. This is big news. The election case is before a judge, but Demuth told Al Travis, a conservative podcast host, that Republicans will ignore the judge's ruling and refuse to seat Tabke, forcing Governor Walz to call a special election in District 54A. That is great news because, like I said, Action for Liberty and the Truth Hurts have been leading on this front, while the Republicans have been not willing to say exactly. So it is nice to see that Demuth is saying the record straight that, you know, no matter what the judge says, we know the 21 ballots were thrown out, and we know the margin of victory was less than that. So Brad Tabke shouldn't be seated no matter what a judge's ruling says anyway. Then let's pull up the B2, Dawson. We can check out what Harry Niska is saying, because Harry Niska is putting up a big fight, and it's nice to see because, you know, we're not used to seeing this kind of stuff from the Republicans at all. So Zach Stevenson is arguing that the court hasn't even ruled on this case and the Republicans are trying to steal an election, yada, yada, yada. Harry Niska says, let's see what the district court says. The facts are clear. 21 disenfranchised voters in a 14-vote margin race. To overcome these facts, Democrats have urged the judge to make a legal error contrary to the longstanding controlling and correct legal precedent that protects the secret ballot from prohibiting reliance on after-the-fact testimony by voters with destroyed ballots. I doubt that the district court will make the legal error
That's actually a really good point.
that the Democrats are hoping for, but if it does, the responsibility for correcting that error lies ultimately with the House. No memes, mean tweets, or shouting should prevent the House from doing its duty. So I think he's making a great point there, and he's highlighting the fact that the secret ballot is a key and pivotal role element of our system of government. And if you eliminate the secret ballot and if you force people to have to testify to what their votes were, you may not get the honest truth because nobody has to be 100%. There's no proof as to who they actually voted for. So you have to rely on people's
proof that
words.
Those are the voters, by the way.
Right, exactly. Yep. So considering all those problems, you can't take what's going to come out of that case necessarily to resolve the matter, because like Harry Niska says here, the matter ultimately should be resolved with the House because the House is the ultimate judge of election returns.
Do you know who also agrees with that position?
Who's that?
Brad Tabke.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Do we have that?
Right. We don't have that one pulled up, but that's a great point that Harry Niska has also brought up multiple times. He's put it up on X. He said it in press conferences, but Harry Niska has said that the Brad Tabke lawyers have argued the very same point, that this is not a matter that belongs in the courts. This is something that is to be decided by the House. Well, they were all for that logic up until the Curtis Johnson situation happened. Then all of a sudden, the Democrats realized we don't have the votes to bring it to the House. So now all of a sudden they want the courts to figure it out instead. And what's very interesting is there is precedent for the removal of representatives after they have been seated and whatnot. There's actually 2 examples of a majority vote taking out a representative who has already been sworn in and been seated. So that's why I say that even if Steve Simon and the Democrats are able to force Brad Tabke to be sworn in on that initial day, that does not mean that the fight is over, because in 1969, there was a member of the State House of Representatives named Bernard Bischoff who was removed from the House on February 7th, 1969, which was after he had been sworn in. And interestingly, that vote took place simply by a voice vote. So you can have a removal of a member based on election problems. And this was, in this example, it was based on campaign procedure where he was lying about his opponent via radio ads and print ads. So based on that removal, they were able to remove Bernard Bischoff simply with a voice vote. So if a voice vote can be taken to remove a member simply with that majority vote, then of course the Republicans have the authority to do so nowadays. And in 1979, the other example, which is when the House was split exactly 67-67, so it's even a better example to be looking at. There was an individual, Robert Pavlock, who was a Republican member of the House. And like I say, the House was divided 67-67, including Pavlock on the GOP side of things. He was sworn in and seated as a member on January 3rd, 1979, which can be found in the Journal. Power sharing agreements were initially struck between the House and House Republicans, House Democrats, but those were ultimately thrown away once this Pavlock battle took place. The Republicans took the speakership in the initial battle, and they gave the Democrats access to control some key committees. The House received a communication from the Minnesota Supreme Court about his lawsuit. So from that point, the Democrats then made a motion that this Pavlock be precluded from being able to vote on related motions. And what basically, I'll get to the point here. The House has the authority to rule that a member cannot vote on matters related to them. The House also has the authority to remove the election certificate of an individual after they have been sworn in. This was done by a majority vote. When it was ultimately taken in 1979, the final vote was 67-66. So that majority vote, by accepting a majority report that came from one of the standing committees that took a look into the 1979 situation with Robert Pavlock, they accepted the report, which basically means that Republicans have every authority, they have every right to be able to revoke Brad Tabke's election certificate. It's maybe a little bit easier to do if they never have him swear in the first place, but even if he does swear in, that is not the end of the line. There are 2 examples of precedent where they had been removed after the fact. So, it's, and like I said, it's only going to be a majority vote. As long as they accept the report by a given committee or provide a report of their own that says that Brad Tabke must be removed and the Republicans vote by it for it, but with a majority vote, it's a done deal. So this is something that the House Republicans have the authority to do, and they must step up to the plate. Don't accept any excuses that they might feed you and tell you that they can't do it for whatever reason, because we've done all of the research, we've done all the background checks here. They can get it done. It just takes them to have some guts to make it happen.
You got called out. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot says, "Yeah, Tushy, get to the point."
Yeah, right. Yep, I could feel I was going on there. I had to.
No, it's good stuff, though.
Right. And those are the only 2 examples of Minnesota history that we have to be able to look at. So I could tell you guys even more about it. But
well, it's funny.
That's unnecessary. You guys get the point that the Republicans have the opportunity here, and they must take it.
It's funny. Jesse comes into the pre-show, and he's got this steps, about removing Tabke, and I go, and scenario 1 and scenario 2 don't both account for the Democrats showing up. And I'm like, yeah, but the whole third one is that they're not going to show. They're not going to show up. Now imagine you're Brad Tabke. This is. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here. Is this not the most entertaining political dynamic in the whole country? Like, this is crazy. We're not even going to talk about the Minnesota Senate today, and that's a crazy story.
Right. The Senate's got its own.
It's got its own craziness.
Yep.
But in the House, like, Brad Tabke has got there's literally, I've never seen this in all my time evaluating the legislature. He's got basically a majority of the body saying we're not going to allow this guy to take office, for valid reasons. And he's not planning on showing up.
Yeah.
Because if he shows up, he completely crushes the whole Democrats' talking point.
He had some bad luck on the first day of session last year, or not last year, 2 years ago. Don't you remember? He crashed his car on the first day of session driving there or something like that. Yeah, so Brad Tabke has a history of tough first days in the legislature, so this one should be no different. Do we want to go into
which is crazy because last I checked, Wolgamott hasn't crashed his car yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one to look out for.
Yeah, especially if he's not showing up for the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about before this thing, there's supposedly blue dog Democrats, and the last one seemed to be Gene Pawlowski, who didn't run again for the 100th time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering, like, if a Gene Pawlowski or Dave Lizagard was still in office, or let's even go back a little further and go back to what's her name, who was the target on Julie Sandstead. Sandstead. Would any of them showed up, or would they have gone with the Democrat establishment?
Yeah, I don't know. It would have been interesting.
They probably would have, right?
Yeah, in Little Falls, actually, Steve Wenzel, who used to be a representative, he was a Democrat during the 1979 session where they were debating the removal of Robert Pavlock. He actually voted with the Republicans on a couple of motions. When you go through and read that House Journal, it's kind of interesting. But for the most part, almost every single thing was a party line vote.
Yeah. Okay. Crazy story. All right. Let's talk about what's going on we are going to talk about the Senate. Senate District 60.
Yeah. So right now, the Senate, 33-33 Senate right now. The Democrats are desperate to try to get their majority back by getting the SD 60 special election over with. But the problem for them is they got someone who does not live where he claims to live. We got another Curtis Johnson situation. Go ahead and pull up the C1, Dawson. We had talked about this article a little bit on Tuesday, but I've got some more information to be able to share with you guys about Mohammed Jama. So go ahead and scroll down, Dawson, because as had been mentioned, he didn't live where he was claiming to live. And keep going, keep scrolling. All right, we're in the right area now. So, yeah, right, scroll up just a tiny bit, Dawson. Right there. Okay, so despite the media questioning his campaign residency legitimacy, you would never know it by checking his social media, his Facebook, his Instagram, or his X account, or by checking his website. Strangely, Jama's X account follows 0 people, but is followed by 945 people, including a Somali mayor of SeaTac, a city in Washington state. Jama has kept his address as private on filing documents for his candidacy, but his website lists an address 620 16th Avenue South in Minneapolis. We assume that would be a campaign address. When you go to that place, it brings you to the back of an African mini mall called the Barwaco African International Mall that has an Islamic travel agency called Al-Asama Travel Agencies, a hair salon, a tutoring service, a Somali Islamic medical center that views the Quran as the general medicine needed, and a restaurant named Gargar that serves goat kidneys, goat liver, and fowl on their breakfast menu. Sounds delicious. Jama is running a strange campaign in a district that he may not be eligible for, and it would be a shame for the Democrats if he won the primary. Go ahead and scroll down, because after the publishing of this article, Mohammed Jama decided to drop out of the race. Considering that January 2nd was the final date for candidates to be able to drop out of the race, have their name removed from the ballot, that means that his name is going to remain on the ballot for this special district primary. He says, dear friends and neighbors, after much reflection, I have decided to withdraw my candidacy for the Minnesota Senate District 60 in the upcoming election. This decision was not made lightly, and I want to express my deepest gratitude to the Cedar Riverside community, which raised me and entrusted me with the responsibility of stepping up to represent our shared values and aspirations. I'm grateful to the unwavering support and guidance I have received from the Somali caucus throughout my candidacy. Your continued encouragement and advice has been invaluable, and I'm proud to stand with such a dedicated and passionate group. Although I am stepping back from this election, my commitment to our community remains steadfast. I will continue to stay active and engaged, working tirelessly to address the challenges we face and advocate for the needs and dreams of our community. Thank you for all who have for all your trust, support, and belief in the vision we share for a brighter future. Sincerely, Mohammed Jama. So it's very interesting that he has decided to drop out of the race. He saw that as the only move to try to save face in this situation because the Democrats had his number, considering the lawsuit that they had going after him, considering that the Senate staffers had turned on him and were releasing text messages to prove they did not live for as long as he needed to for this Senate district. So there is still the possibility that Mohammed Jama pulls off the win and actually wins that Democrat primary. In that situation, the Democrats are screwed again. So we'll just have to see how that shakes out. With him dropping out, of course, the Democrats are going to make sure that that news is out there so that he does not get the votes. But considering it's like an 8-person primary, there's still a chance that a guy named Mohammed Jama can still win all the Islamic votes that are going to be captured within Minneapolis. So never say never, but it's looking most likely that he will not win.
You know, I just saw this comment here from in the Shogren. It says, Senate should take a vote on whether Port is able to remain a member. Said that her health is deteriorated, but the seat belongs to people. I've heard this through the rumor mill. I haven't seen a public story. I know she was dealing with what they call long COVID, whatever the hell that is, by the way. But I'm not aware of something publicly on Lindsey Port. But a Democrat state senator apparently has got deteriorating health. Do you know if? I'd love anyone in the comment section if you know some public source for this. But yeah, and maybe there's not a public source because they want to be tight-lipped about it because of the dynamics. Because the Senate right now is a tie. So if someone was incapable of voting, I mean, we brought this up with Carrie Dietzek before she passed away. Like, how do we know she's even voting? Port couldn't vote on the issue. Rumor is she is hospitalized. I know that's a rumor. That's all I've heard is rumors on that. I mean, it's probably true. Is anyone asking, making sure Republicans all know this? Maybe we need an emergency meeting with them. Yeah, I don't know. That's what I've heard. So, but I haven't seen a public source for it. Mm-hmm. And there's an actual reason why you wouldn't see a public source if it's true. So,
yeah. And you know, the other thing we talked about last episode too was that these writs of election were illegal, and that is just the case as well for the Senate race, considering the fact that the writ was not posted in time. Let's see. She's dying.
Waleski Tango Foxtrot. If you know something, public source, let us know. I don't see anything on social media.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how crazy would that be? 2 Democrats die within a short period of time.
Right.
Yeah.
Lindsey Port's young, isn't she?
Yeah, it doesn't mean young women don't get breast cancer or something like that.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, last segment here, and then we're gonna do our post show. If you want to join us, I got some really interesting stuff. We're talking about Tom Emmer. We're gonna talk about that in the post show. Some intel. So yeah, being part of the post show, being a supporter, a premium supporter, you get some of the inside information and rumors. You know, sometimes I leave the rumors for the post show because if it's not ready, if it hasn't met the journalistic standard of checking sources, because by the way, most rumors end up being true, but it's not meeting the journalistic standard of validating your sources and, you know, getting corroborating evidence. Now I sound like a lawyer. I only play one on Twitter, by the way. But I try to keep in the post show because the show is called Truth Hurts. So the post show, we might have a little bit more flexibility on that stuff, but it's not ready for the public eye yet. But we do have some good stuff for the post show. If you want to join us the post show, go to truthhurtsnews.com. On the top, click on support us. Even if you're watching after the fact, most people watch our show after the live version. So, what do we got here? Minnesota DFL Senator to shift to remote work as she battles long COVID. Yeah, but that's an old article. Yeah, she had I'm curious because I had heard something recently. What is long COVID, by the way? Sometimes believe it's a vaccine injury.
Mm-hmm.
Or did she not get the vaccine?
I doubt that.
Yeah, I know, right? All right, last segment. Let's talk about Kendall Qualls. Oh, if you want to be a premium subscriber, go to truthhurtsnews.com, click on support us, or if you're on Rumble, just click on join. And $8 a month helps tremendously. A lot of people like the yearly, so it's $88 a year. You get a month off. Kendall Qualls. This is a rumor I've seen. Let me read this. Jesse. Where was this? somewhere in here.
I had seen it as well. I think I know what you're talking about. The rumor mill. Let's see.
Okay, so what's the web domain quallsforgovernor.com was registered recently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there, and I think I had heard some talk about this somewhere else. So the talk is Kendall Qualls is being run or is planning on running for governor in 2026. I don't get it, Jesse. What do people see in this guy? Like, I don't understand. I mean, it seems like a perfectly nice guy, although, you know, I had a big issue with him in 2022 when he basically shat on the Never Again bill. Seems like he's a pro emergency powers kind of governor candidate.
After initially saying he would sign it.
Right. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Is that your video?
Yeah.
So I don't get it. Like, why? Who's pushing this guy? And yeah, I did see Jensen's. I see Whiskey Tango Fox. I was talking about Jensen's testing the waters. Like, come on! Like, clearly you guys aren't the right answer for Minnesota. By the way, Qualls became the establishment pick. Like, I was at that convention. Jensen was more of the grassroots guy.
Right.
Which
And
is goofy.
Kendall Qualls, you know, he came out and endorsed David Han at the 2022 State Central Committee convention.
Did he?
Yeah, he gave his opening statement for him. He, like you said about the emergency powers, that was a big issue where he was promising to sign on to it. His website changed 3 separate times about what his position on emergency powers was. We were consistent in saying we are opposed to a governor having unilateral authority. Kendall Qualls didn't have that position. He seemed to think that he deserved to have that unilateral authority under certain circumstances. He also endorsed Joe Frazier over Royce White after the endorsing convention. So if we want to be a party that
he didn't abide by the endorsement,
right? So
that's interesting.
That's one of those things that if we want to be a party that supports the endorsement, Kendall Qualls obviously isn't that ticket because he can't be trusted. And after he lost to Scott Jensen at that endorsing convention, the rumor was that he was going to continue on to a primary. He didn't endorse Scott Jensen at that convention. The rumor was going for a few days until he got behind him and endorsed him. Of course, he was going to make Michelle Tafoya his lieutenant governor. That's why he wasn't announcing his lieutenant governor at the state convention, because he realized that would tank his campaign. So he was trying to do it after the fact and lie to people about it because he claimed that she wasn't going to be his lieutenant governor. So, you know, it's no surprise to me that he's a ladder climber that is just trying to continue to stay relevant. He's a horrible debater. So he would not be the choice at all for Republicans if you want to win a debate and if you want to, because all you got to do is watch his debates with Dean Phillips, and you'll see that this guy is not talented at all. This guy is just another establishment puppet, and honestly, if he wasn't black, nobody would care. That's the only reason that these Republicans give him any time. It's because, they're all so, they all want a black Republican, which... we had one with Royce White, and
they didn't want that one.
Right, they didn't want that one. Kendall Qualls certainly wasn't happy about that. So, it needs to come back down to the issues. It needs to come back less about identity and more about what are you actually going to do? What do you actually stand for?
Yeah, really, it doesn't matter what your skin color is, what race, ethnicity, and anything. It's just what do you have to offer? And I just don't understand. It's not like he's impressive. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you see him being the successful candidate? Like, at this point, although that's assuming Walls runs again, and we don't know that, and if he does run again, he's probably not running with Peggy Flanagan, which means there's probably some kind of faction that goes against Walls. But it's like, regardless of going against Walls or not, how are you all of a sudden going to be the Republican that wins? You're not going to take risks. You're not going to say something interesting. You're not going to have a larger-than-life personality. You are literally the milquetoast, typical candidate, country club candidate that they all want. Like the establishment wants, not the people. The establishment wants. It's like, I'm not saying you got to have a Trump. People that try to imitate
Marty
Trump, it doesn't work
1967
well,
is endorsing me for governor. Well, thank you very much.
No, she means Ventura.
Yeah, maybe Ventura, yeah, but... Yeah, I'm not interested. But no, I don't think Qualls should be interested in that position either, because like you're saying, he is not the guy who can actually win that campaign. And I got to give it to Scott Jensen, despite him being a rhino and despite him having all these flaws with him. What he was able to get was a lot of energy surrounding his campaign with the help of Matt Burke, of course. But I think he was able to capture a lot more energy than Kendall Qualls would have been able to. Of course, a lot more than someone like Paul Gazelka or Michelle Benson was going to be able to. It was basically only Neil Shaw that could put up a real fight against Walls from what I saw of the candidates that had existed in 2022.
By the way, I don't agree with that about Scott Jensen. It was predates Matt Burke. He perfectly positioned himself as the truth-telling doctor, right? Mm-hmm. And credit where it's due, he was right on a lot of the COVID stuff, right? Problem is, we just know who Scott Jensen was. He's a politician. Like, when push comes to shove, he did not stand up in the Minnesota Senate when he had a chance to actually end Walls of Mercy Powers or fire Jan Malcolm.
Yeah.
So we know who he is as a politician, but he took the right principled stance. And so for that, he had a slew of good supporters. Like, that was tricky for us, is we're like, well, we know who Scott Jensen is and not supportive of that guy. But his followers, it's kind of like Trump in some regards, right? The followers are pure and great. Like, his followers they agreed with us on COVID. It was actually kind of troublesome because people wouldn't understand, wait, you guys speak right on COVID, so why are you against Scott Jensen? It's like, well, how much time do you have? It takes a little time to explain this, you know? Yes, he's right about the vaccine. Yes, he's right about lockdowns. But where was he when we were locked down? He wasn't the leader that we needed on lockdown. So he lacked the political will. Mm-hmm. You know, but I mean, still, Kendall Qualls, like, that's not a fighter. Like, why does anyone think that guy's going to be good?
Right. Sjogren US says, what are the odds on Emmer taking a run? I think low. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that he probably has more interest in trying to chase the speakership than he does for the governor, just because the governor is going to be a tougher battle. Mm-hmm. So I would think that that's much more likely. But, you know, I was thinking about, we actually had a candidate for governor already on our podcast. We've had Brad Kohler, who apparently is announcing a run, which...
Brad, just, why do you got to run for everything? Like,
yeah.
Brad, he's a nice guy. Stop running.
Yeah.
I don't get it. You're not a good candidate. It's just don't run. Do other things in politics. Oh, so weird.
Right. We can say with pretty much 100% certainty Brad Kohler is not going to be the next governor of Minnesota. I like Brad, but he should pick his battles a little better.
Right. Well, just not run. I mean, literally runs at everything all the time. Like, he's becoming that guy. There's some people that are always running on ballots in Minnesota, and they kind of become just a butt of a joke. And sometimes, God, it was not that long ago, the person won in CD4 for the primary on the Republican side. I mean, they got clobbered by Betty McCollum, but they actually beat the endorsed candidate who had, like, no campaign.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they just keep running. Sometimes you got to get understanding you're not a good candidate. Mm-hmm. What was I going to say? Show note. Tuesday, they gavel in at noon. So we'll be live earlier. We have no show prep on Tuesday. You know that? Jesse, I kind of want to be there, but we'll have some insiders, okay? Let's just put that. We'll have some insiders, but we're going to be here live streaming. The show will probably start about 11:45, live streaming the beginning of the legislative session. I don't know what's going to happen. Listen, if you know a Republican legislator, share that article on truthhurtsnews.com with them. Let them know. You better do that. If Steve Simon tries to adjourn them, he can't do that. Stick around. Vote for your presiding officer. The law and the Constitution are on your side. Or be a bunch of cowards and pussies, and what's all this for, right? The Democrats are clearly in the wrong here. All right.
That's why I think people need to do one of two things. If you have a Republican representative in the state house, what you need to do is you need to contact them and pressure them to make sure that they are going to cut the state budget and that they are going to make sure that Brad Tabke does not get seated, does not get sworn in. They need to make sure that the 40B race is also not going to be sworn in or seated. If you have a Democrat representative, what you need to do is start talking with your BPOU and start organizing a plan for you to be able to recall them and do a recall petition. I know my BPOU is already in the midst of talking about that with Stinky Finky, and I'd like to see all the Democrats be taken out if they're not willing to show up and do their job. So You're either represented by a Republican or a Democrat. Whichever one it is, you either need to be pressuring the Republican or you need to be recalling the Democrat.
All right, let's go to the post show. Got some interesting gossip on Tom Emmer and some, well, I guess it's not gossip. It's actually intel. Emmer team. We'll talk about that in the post show and some other things. Join us. Thank you to our sponsors, Warren Wessel of Keller Williams Realty. If you're looking to buy a home or sell a home, give my good friend Warren a call at 612-419-7453. I just had a Joe Biden moment for a second there. Also brought to you by John Galt Mortgage Company. Why am I so tired? I had so much energy going in the show. Oh, my God. My friends Dan and Beth swung by. They like coming before the show, and I pretty much put all the energy I was going to put into the show discussing this with them. It was great. I love them to death. But maybe I've done this 3 times today, and I might need a nap. Man, that makes me sound old. And I'm not old, so never mind. I'll power on. More coffee. There you go. JohnGaltMortgage.com if you want to buy a home. Give them a chance of financing that home. And Alpine Cabinetry in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Starting the post show in 1 minute. For everyone else, we'll be back here live in the studio, 11:45 a.m. for the start of the Minnesota Legislative Fireworks Session. Take care.